Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what is making the headlines with the chief political correspondent at The Guardian, Jessica Elgot, and the Whitehall editor at the Financial Times, Sebastian Payne. Jessica joining us very shortly. Sebastian, good to see you. So let's see what's on the front pages then. Russians give up on conquest of Kiev is on the front of the Telegraph as Moscow redeploys troops away from the capital, citing efforts to build trust in peace talks. But the Metro describes it as Russian roulette as the US urges people to be clear-eyed about what is happening on the ground. The Times also looks at the US and Britain's doubts over the Kremlin's intentions. The Queen of Broken Hearts is on the front page of The Sun as Her Majesty remembered her husband, Prince Philip, at his memorial service. The Pain and the Stain is the Mirror's headline, highlighting Prince Andrew's appearance at the Queen's side weeks after he paid millions to settle a sexual abuse lawsuit. The Express says the Queen's decision to allow him to escort her sparked tensions within the royal family. The Financial Times leads on disputes between Russia and the EU as Moscow insists that gas exports are paid in rubles to prop up the currency. The Eye reporting that the Prime Minister still does not accept lockdown laws were broken at number 10, despite 20 fines being issued to staff by police. That is also the story for The Guardian, which says Mr Johnson faces a renewed threat to his position. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So we're joined then by Jessica Elgot and Sebastian Payne. She looks round, hoping Jessica's there. She is, yes, well done. Wi-Fi issues once again. Anyway, great to see both of you. But let's kick off, shall we, with those peace talks that we saw today between Russia and Ukraine. And Sebastian, with this promise by the Russians to drastically reduce combat operations around both the capital and the northern city of Chernihiv, and the reaction to that.
So nobody wants to get ahead of themselves here because obviously we've heard a lot of propaganda from Moscow about its intentions in Ukraine, and it's hard to know whether this is actually true. Is it really pulling back operations, or is it in fact just saying that while redeploying troops to different parts of Ukraine? But we do know that bit by bit, those negotiations are starting to edge towards some kind of conclusion that could lead to a ceasefire. The problem, though, is any kind of settlement is going to have to result in some part of Ukraine as disputed territory at best. And that's incredibly hard for President Zelensky to sell to his people. And the outlines you can imagine would be that there'd be the eastern part of Ukraine would be at best disputed territory. This would go to a referendum. There would be security guarantees to ensure that Russia doesn't invade again. They'd probably be backed up with support from the UK, from France and Germany. There may also be the option for Ukraine to join the EU, but it would have to take neutrality from NATO and on all military matters. So those talks seem to be heading towards something. Everyone obviously hopes and desperately wants there to be some kind of ceasefire, but the UK has been particularly sceptical about, is this the reality of what's going on here? And Boris Johnson has described this offer and the suggestion from Russia that they are pulling troops back from Kiev as twisting the knife in an open wound. So that gives you the idea of what the UK feels here. And we also know that the Wagner Group, which is a military personnel who are deployed by the Kremlin across the world, they brought 1,000 troops into Ukraine. So it's a very messy picture. It's not as if this thing is coming to a conclusion. There's not an obvious solution here, but there are tentative signs that we could be heading towards a ceasefire, which given the last 3 or 4 weeks of suffering would be very welcomed by all. But of course, you know, obviously Russia is the aggressor here, and the UK in particular does not want to seem to be rewarding it. And I think again on the front page of the Times is concerns in Westminster that Boris Johnson fears France and Germany may in fact allow land to be given away to Russia just to get a ceasefire. That's not a place President Zelensky wants. It's not a place the UK wants to be either.
Yes, you've certainly outlined the issues for the future. But Jessica, back to the immediate term, the US, and if we look at the Metro, in fact, you know, it's Russian roulette, the US warning, don't be fooled by Moscow's move. There's a deep lack of trust in anything that Russia says. The US saying it's not a withdrawal, it's a redeployment. But militarily, does this mean actually we should accept that they feel they are overstretched, that they can't take Kiev, that the Ukrainians are pushing back in places like Irpin, this northwest settlement, or northwest of Kiev rather, and actually it's an admission of failure by the Russians?
I think that's probably, a good reading of the scenario. That the Pentagon seems to suggest that they have witnessed some movement by some Russian units away from Kyiv in the last day or so, but they think it's small numbers and they think it's essentially a repositioning, not a major withdrawal, and that we should all be prepared to watch for a major offensive against other areas of Ukraine, potentially to show that the Russians are seriously, committed to taking territory elsewhere. I mean, it is also, as you say, kind of an acknowledgement of what the situation is around, where the advance has been stalling for weeks, and Ukrainian forces have had some recent successes in taking back territory, and Russia doesn't seem to have the forces to be able to encircle the city in the way that it had originally intended. So, obviously that's, there's some parts of that which are positive, but I think, it's probably right, and you hear scepticism in London and in Washington about the terms of these peace negotiations and how much they are actually progressing.
In the meantime, if we go to the business section of the Telegraph, Sebastian, yacht seizing continues, this time in the UK.
Yes, there's a picture of Grant Shapps, who's acquired himself a new toy today, which is a £36 million super yacht that has been impounded by the government. You can see it pictured there in London. There's been some suggestions on Twitter this could be a nice Jubilee present for the Queen and make up for the new royal yacht there. But this is an example of the government trying to pursue those sanctions and those frozen assets and make sure that they are within the government's control there. And I can imagine we'll see a lot more of this in terms of properties, in terms of boats. But it's a very good visual, and I have to say, when I saw the picture of that yacht, I thought it was rather ostentatious, and I was not a particular fan of the colour scheme they've got there, but at least it seems to match Grant Shapps's tie. And I think that, there's a lot of reports coming out from these oligarchs who've had their assets seized, and some of them are claiming that they can now not do anything. They can't work, they can't travel, all they have is the roof above their head because everything else is totally frozen. And if we flip this back to what it means for the situation in Ukraine, again, there's some fears in Whitehall that what could happen is if there is a ceasefire and if Russia agrees to take no more land, then some European countries might want to ease back sanctions immediately because, of course, they're having a huge economic effect on the whole of the West's economy. That would obviously be a pretty dangerous thing to do because it's saying to Russia, well, you've taken some land, you've had a temporary hit, but then in fact, you've got that new land and your sanctions are getting pulled back. So the UK is still very much at the forefront of this, and the forefront of being as tough as possible. And I imagine no matter what happens with other countries, they'll keep seizing yachts and keep seizing properties and using this as a very visual example of the fight against the Putin regime.
The Transport Secretary saying the detention sent a clear and stark warning to Putin and his cronies. The FT, though, reporting that the yacht is ultimately owned by a little-known businessman who's at odds with the Russian state over a tax evasion investigation. So we'll have to see what happens with the photo opportunity of Mr. Shapps there. In the meantime, to domestic matters and to The Guardian, Jessica, law breaking in number 10. This is an article partly written by you as well. So talk us through what we've finally learned in terms of Partygate.
Well, we have finally learned something which should sound extraordinary, but something that we've kind of become just normalised in the past few months, is that there was law breaking in the heart of Downing Street, that people who set the rules, or amongst those who communicated the rules to the general public, which meant that people took enormous sacrifices to stay indoors, not to meet up with their loved ones during the pandemic, and which we were told were essential to save lives. That the rules were broken so egregiously in Downing Street that the Metropolitan Police have decided that they merit being issued a fine, and that is 20 people, and we're told it's the first tranche. Now, just to step back a minute, that is quite an extraordinary moment. And yes, there are lots of things that we still don't know. We still don't know if Boris Johnson is going to be issued with a fine himself. We know that the Metropolitan Police are looking at 6 events which he's said to have attended, and we know that there are, these are supposed to be the cases, or we're told these are the cases that are most straightforward. So there will have been, it was intimated to me, people who just copped it and said, yeah, give me a fine. I admit it, and I don't want to drag this on. And so therefore, that it could easily be that number of people who the evidence is just so overwhelming that they invited people to the parties, or that they admitted being at the parties, that they can just issue the fines. But the Prime Minister is contesting it, so you wouldn't expect necessarily for him to be among the earliest of those who were issued a fine. And talking to Tory MPs today, especially those ones who have bit more rebelliously inclined, it's a start of a job for them to start convincing people that it is still the right thing to do for the Prime Minister to go. And it starts with saying that because there was law breaking in Downing Street, the Prime Minister's denials and his insistence that the guidance was followed at all times means that he has essentially lied to the House of Commons. Boris Johnson, denies all of that, says he didn't, says he was misled or whatever, and has apologised for attending at least one of the events, but only one of them, as far as I'm aware. And we'll see how he manages to get round any sort of further accusations, against his senior staff and himself.
Yes, I mean, that theme is picked up by the eye, isn't it? The PM is in denial, the paper says, over number 10 party fines. What does he do about it? The convention is, I guess, you lie to Parliament, you go. He's not so fond of conventions. Will he ride this one out, Sebastian?
You certainly try and ride it out. And I think we've seen those clips shared endlessly on social media today of Boris Johnson saying in December guidance was followed at all times, when now we know that that was not true, because the Met have issued these 20 fines. And as Jessica said, we don't know who to. They could be 20 different people. They could be a smaller number of people getting multiple fines. Again, all this is incredibly unclear. But I think the fact is that this is coming to a head pretty soon for Boris Johnson. And if he is personally fined, he is in grave political trouble, because it simply means the Met believes the Prime Minister would have conducted criminal activity. And that's as simple as that. He would have broken the law. And I think you can strip away all the politics at that point and just say that it becomes a very difficult situation for the Prime Minister. But if he doesn't get fined, then essentially it'll be one hop and free as how people in number 10 see it, and he will do another mea culpa. He'll apologise for the behaviour of those around him, probably institute some kind of alcohol ban within Downing Street. But I think this question about has he lied or has he misled? Well, the key thing that the Prime Minister says to Parliament was there were no parties, but defining a party is very difficult. As far as you and I are concerned, Jessica, this could be a party right now, and no one could want to sort of exactly put a definition to that. So Boris Johnson is obviously, the words he's used in Parliament are very careful, and obviously the sentiment and the tone of what he said may not have been straightforward.
Sebastian.
But was it straightforward lie? Then I think that's much more difficult. But I think Tory MPs are just very much in a wait and see place at the moment. If he doesn't get fined, it's much less dangerous. If he does, then it's very perilous.
Apologies for rushing you. Just want to show the Matt cartoon as well, front page of the Telegraph. It looks like partying coppers actually delivering the party fines delivered with a rush of them and some balloons. Party here, I don't know, I'm on my tard apart from the floor manager, so there we are. Anyway, maybe it is. Stay there, lots more still to come, including the Payne and the Stain controversy as Prince Andrew accompanies the Queen to a service commemorating Prince Philip. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, the chief political correspondent at The Guardian, Jessica Elgot, and the Whitehall editor at the Financial Times, Sebastian Payne. Welcome back to both of you. And Jessica, for very many people, it would be wonderful to see the Queen today, even though the occasion itself was obviously incredibly sad, not least for her, if we take a look at a number of the newspapers, including the Daily Mirror.
Yes, and seeing that picture of the Queen, I mean, the look of devastation on her face will touch anyone, especially anyone who's lost a partner or lost someone close to them. Anything that helps Prince Andrew rehabilitate his reputation is something that I would balk at. But on the other hand, having her child next to her at that moment of grief feels harsh to try and deny anybody that.
And he, Prince Andrew is the second son of the man being remembered, of course. Daily Mail picks up on that, though. Royals dismay at Andrew's role, taking centre stage in the Philip Memorial Service. Sebastian, I don't know what your paper feels about it.
The FT tends to not have too many views on royal matters, I have to say. But my personal view on this thing, that it was such a great shame and a disaster to have the Duke of York there. And there's reports on the Mail and other papers that he has split the royals, with Charles and William being quite unhappy at the fact he was there. You know, this is a man who's had to settle the most unbelievable sum of money with someone who's accused him of the most awful crimes. And the fact that he was at the front and centre of the Queen's first major public appearance in 6 months, I think it was a big misstep. And again, we all know for a long time that Prince Andrew has been described as the Queen's favourite son, and that may be the case. But I think in today's service, which was absolutely beautiful, and it was very wonderful to see the Queen out and about again, this was a mistake, and he shouldn't have been there. And if he was there, he should have been in the shadows, not putting himself front and centre.
Sebastian Payne from the FT, Jessica Elgot from The Guardian, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.